Hi everyone, we have made it to our final ethics topic. This one is business ethics. Now, before you think, oh, business ethics, bear with me. This one I think is one of the best topics. Why? Because it's so relevant, it's so current, it's so up to date, and it really does affect and integrate itself into your lives. So let's have a look. Don't forget as well, this one is an application topic. Whoops. What that means is What this means is that you need to apply Kant and or utilitarianism to this topic, or you might get a question on this topic on its own. So you might just get a general ethics, business ethics question, so it might be something like there's no ethics in business, discuss. Or you might get a Kant and duty as applied to business, or a utilitarianism applied to business. So natural law and situation ethics do not touch this topic. This topic is either on its own or with Kant and utilitarianism. So, if we were in class, we would have a look at this picture and we'd explore what this picture was telling us, and I'd get you to write down some questions that you have. So some of the common questions that students ask are things like where his shoes, when was this taken? Who was it taken by? Where are they? Why are they working? Where are they working? And as you can probably gather, this picture was taken at turn of the century. It is in England, and obviously it's a workhouse. It's some sort of millinery where these boys are working, and it's because obviously back in them days, if you didn't work, you didn't eat. So it meant that every mouth that needed to be fed had to work in order to get food. And then things like health and safety were not around at that time like they are today. So, Henry Ford, please jot this down, as in Mr. Ford, car Ford. You might have a Ford in your family. A business that makes nothing but money is a poor kind of business. But the question is Ford really that ethical? We're going to have a look at the Ford Pinto case. Pinto was the name of the car in the 1970s. And so please do summarise this case study. During crash tests which preceded, so came before the sales of the Pinto to the public, a serious design flaw was discovered. The gas tank was so designed that when it was involved in a rear-end collision at impact speed of 20 miles per hour or greater, the tank was likely to rupture, causing a fire and explosion. So what that's basically saying is that if your car is hit from behind by another car or vehicle at 20 miles an hour or more, the car is likely to explode. And they found this before the car was released to the public. They worked out that it wasn't satisfactory and that it would cost $11 per car to change. A confidential company memo directed that the safety features not be adopted until it was made legal by law. So because the law didn't require you to make these changes, even though you found it before the car sales, and even though you knew it would cause death, they by law did not have to do it back in the 70s. And this is because they weighed up the numbers. They looked at the roughly the amount of deaths, burn cases and burnt vehicles that might happen, and then obviously the suing, etc., that would come from that. So obviously from different car collision records, things like that, they could kind of work out roughly how many likely collisions there would be, and they worked out that the cost of these incidences would become to about 49.5 million. They then compared it with how much it would cost to change all cars and all light trucks, and they worked out that to change the gas tanks in all of the vehicles that had been made would cost them 137.5 million. So what did they decide? They decided it was cheaper and more cost effective to let people die and not change the cars than to change all the cars to make them safer. So the design was rushed. The normal time to produce a car was about 43 months. Ford took 25 for the Pinto. Before production, Ford engineers discovered flaws in the car's engine. In nearly all rear-end crash test collisions, the Pinto's fuel system would rupture extremely easily. Because assembly line was already in place, when the engineers found the defect, top Ford officials decided to manufacture the car anyway, even though Ford owned the patent on a much safer gas tank. So not only did they actually find the problem, they had an alternative. It wasn't even like they had to create a new alternative or they had to buy an alternative for somewhere else. They actually had the patent for a better gas tank that they didn't then use because the cost would be too much. Oops, apologies. Obviously, they were found out about this, and this is, later on the laws were changed. When manufacturers did find these sorts of issues, they had to then declare them or change them, etc. Take something off the shelves, for example. But in this case, they weighed up the cost of death versus the cost of changing the cars. Now, one comment a student said a few years ago, which I'd never really seen it like that, which I thought was extremely interesting, was why didn't they just add $11 on the price of each car? If it was going to cost $11 per car to change it, why not just add that to the cost of the car? Then they wouldn't have to pay $137.5 million. Seems like a no-brainer, but it maybe is so obvious that you then don't think about it, because I certainly hadn't until that student mentioned it. So yeah, just food for thought. We would then have a bit of a discussion about ethical questions. So we would have had a discussion about this idea that should supermarkets be allowed to charge for carrier bags? Should supermarkets sell lager cheaper than bottled water? Should businesses profit from gambling? Is ethical shopping a luxury we cannot afford? And why should a company pay more than minimum wage unless it has to? So the couple that usually we are drawn towards is certainly the last question, because a lot of you will have employment and you will be on minimum wage if you're lucky, maybe just below, especially if you're only 16 and there's different kind of laws around that. But why should a company pay you more? Why should a company pay more than minimum wage if they don't have to? So it's quite an interesting question, really, because some companies do. Some companies pay more. Why? Why should they pay more? Is it just because it's ethical? Is it just because it's nice? Why do you think? So do you think companies should pay more than the basic minimum wage? The other one is this idea of charging for carrier bags. Now, I wrote that question a lot of years ago when it was kind of when you used to randomly get charged for carrier bags in certain shops and not in others, whereas obviously now it is law that you are charged for carrier bags. For me, I'm kind of one of these that's caught in the middle when it comes to charging for carrier bags. Now, yeah, they're only kind of 5-10p, even though some of them now are like 50p. And yeah, it's not big money, but every time you go shopping, if you forget the bags, etc., and yes, you should use the bags again and again. But I can honestly say that my boot is full of bags, and yes, they're called bags for life. Have I ever actually taken a bag back in and asked for another bag when that one's split or ripped? No. Does charging for carrier bags make people use less of them? Maybe they do. I don't know. But for me, it would be interesting to know where the money actually goes, because the money only ever seems to go back into their tills, etc. Are they calculated based on receipts, how many carrier bags have been sold, and then that money goes towards environmental help, etc.? I'm not sure. So it would certainly be interesting to know that, yes, we're charging for carrier bags to save the planet, but who's actually profiting from it? Is the environment actually getting any benefit from it, other than the loss of plastic? Something else that was quite interesting that I saw on Facebook the other day surrounding Pancake Day was all of these plastic bottles with the pancake mixes in, and people were saying, that all these plastic bottles that are just for a one-off event, you shouldn't be mass producing all of this plastic. So plastic and the debate around the plastic and the environment is very, very interesting when it comes to business ethics, and it's things that you can talk about. So, an oxymoron is when two words don't go together. So the words are good ethics and good business. Can business be ethical? Do these words ethics and business really go together? Now, Dame Anita Roddick, who was the founder of Body Shop, and obviously Body Shop was famous for its anti-animal testing, animal cruelty, and very, very much it was kind of the Body Shop before Lush, and obviously Lush very much try and help with the environment. They don't give packaging, they let you refill things after so many times, etc. And so for her, she said that being good is good business, that basically it's good business to be good. Even if you charge more, people will come back. And what she's promoting is what is called intrinsic reasons. Intrinsic reasons is doing it because it's the right thing to do, not for any other reason than just it's the right thing to do. Whereas on the other hand, Lord Alan Sugar is a big business magnate. He says, are you the cheap one, the one with good service, the ethical or bespoke one? What's your hook? Basically, he's arguing that being the ethical one is just a hook to get people to come to you. So obviously, Lush is the ethical one, or Primark is the cheap one. So what is your hook? He just says it's good business. So when and some of you have found this in the research that you've sent me, when supermarkets advertise all their charity events and all the charity money that they've donated, is that because they're doing it for intrinsic reasons, because it's the right thing to do, that they want to raise money? Or are they doing it because it makes them look good? Are they doing it because that's their hook? Oh, we're the charitable one, come shop with us. So that is what is known as extrinsic reasons. You're doing it because you look good from the outside world. It's extrinsic, it's outside. Okay, now within business, there are a number of issues, and these issue branches you need to be able to talk about, and you need to use them in your different paragraphs. So the first one is corporate social responsibility. Now, this sounds like a real mouthful, CSR. You can call it CSR in an essay, but obviously the first time you use it, please put it in full so that you show an examiner that you know what it means. But it's very, very straightforward. So let's just break down the word first of all. Corporate obviously means group. You already know this from corporate religious experiences. So corporate means group. Social responsibility, your responsibility to society. So as a group or a company, it's your responsibility to society that you have. And what falls under this bracket are stakeholders and shareholders, profit versus ethics, and consumer rights. So let's start by having a look at Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman is a really, really good name that you can use in an essay. He's an economist. Now, it's quite complicated, his argument, but certainly if you feel confident, you could use him in an essay. So what he says is this: there is one and only one social responsibility of business. To use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say engaged in open and free competition without deception or fraud. Basically, as long as you don't deceive anybody and you're not fraudulent, then what you need to do, whatever you can do in order to make more profits. And at the end of the day, that's what businesses are about. A business is about making a profit. Otherwise, it's not a business. So you have to make money in order for it to keep going. So he said that basically, as long as you are open and free in your competition. So for example, I remember in Hull years ago, there was a pound shop, and over the road, they opened a 99p shop. So 1 penny cheaper, and the pound shop eventually shut down because it could not compete with the competition from over the road. That's absolutely fair. There's no deceiving there, there's no fraud there, they're open about it, and it's fair competition, and that's exactly what they did, so in order to make profits. Friedman was reacting to the idea that businesses have a social responsibility to improve workers' lives and help communities. For Friedman, this is socialism. So this idea that we have a responsibility to help all the workers and help communities. But what he's arguing, he argued, made capitalism, this private ownership and businesses completely free to make profit, less effective, and restricted the rights of individuals to improve their lives. Basically, he's saying that people should be able to make money. People should be able to work in a business, be successful, make lots of money, because that's what they put into it. So he says that we should be able to have capitalism rather than just this supporting workers' lives and helping communities, that actually people should be able to make their own money and make lots of it. Milton Friedman continued then, the strengths of his views. The main focus of a business should be to make profit. Without profit, a business cannot survive. In a way, Friedman's theory does promote social responsibility to society, because obviously if there's money in society, the society will prosper. The increase of profits in a company benefits the economy, which benefits the citizens of that economy. More money in the system. Issues, however. Friedman also believed that social responsibility should not be forced by the government, which it currently is now. You have to be ethical and you have to follow social responsibility. And he's saying it shouldn't need to be forced. However, companies can still be successful while pursuing several different methods of social responsibility at the same time. So, for example, responsibility to stakeholders can still be achieved while helping to strengthen the community. So basically, you can still be very profitable but also very ethical at the same time. That's what the weakness is. Alright, so just a little help here with your words, shareholders and stakeholders. Businesses have a duty and an obligation to consider the effects of their activities on society as a whole. So shareholders. Shareholders are people that have shares or money in a business. So, for example, some of your family might have shares in the potash mine off Whitby Road. So you are a shareholder. You hold shares within that business. So this is a bit like rich man's gambling. That's what I always think, that you're putting money in different businesses in the hopes that it goes up and down. This is the stock market, the idea of, moving your money around to where your shares are more valuable, etc. The key priority of a business should be to make profit for its shareholders. These are people who have invested money into the success of a business, more successful, more return on your money. So basically, you put money into a business. If that business is very successful, your bit of money might then double, triple, quadruple, etc. And so that's the hope. Hence why I said it's a bit of a gamble, because you have to invest your money correctly, but then you might get a windfall. So for example, if you have shares in Google, for example, right back in the day when it was first starting out, if you have shares in Amazon, for example, you'll be rolling in it now. Your shares will be worth so much money, because obviously people buy shares and they buy at a very high price. Stakeholders. Now, the way I remember stakeholders is it's people that have something at stake, so have something at risk of losing. And so a business must monitor and ensure it complies not only with the law, but with accepted ethical standards as well. The wide needs of employees, consumers, the community should be considered. Consumers are you. Consumers are people that buy things, that consume things. So we are all stakeholders. I'm a stakeholder in college, and that it's my job and my employment. So I have my job at stake. You have your education at stake. When you go into a shop, for example, you are a stakeholder in that you are buying something from them, and therefore you need to know that what you're buying is of a certain quality and standard. But the question then is this just hypocritical window dressing to cover the greed, the profit-making intentions of businesses? So basically what I was asking is hypocritical window dressing is this idea of when you have a shop window and you dress it up to look all fancy and nice. Are businesses pretending that they're charitable and ethical and look after their employees and all of this? Is it just window dressing for actually a company that isn't that ethical and a business that just wants more profit? Or are they doing it for genuine reasons? So what are stakeholders? There are internal ones and external ones. Internal ones, these are groups within a business. So it's the owner, they have something at stake, they want to make profit. The managers for the salary, they're workers because they want to keep their jobs and have high wages. Suppliers, so people that give produce, they want to then be paid. Lenders, obviously after you lend money from the bank to start a business, they want their money back. External stakeholders, these are people outside, so like the customers want to know that there's quality products, the community and the local environment. You don't want, for example, a noisy factory or pumping pollution into the sea, for example. So stakeholders, again, a business has to consider these, and sometimes the interests of the internal and the external stakeholders can conflict. Also, sometimes shareholders and stakeholders can conflict. Now, I know there's quite a lot of words here and words that you might not be familiar with, so just pause it, bear with it, go through it. Obviously, fill out your glossaries as you're going along as well, just to help you learn your new words. The relationship then between businesses and the buyer, the consumer. Originally, this simply meant not conning the customer to buy something he or she didn't need, such as PPI. Now, you'll probably have heard about PPI quite a lot, or maybe not even know what it actually is. PPI was mis-sold insurance, basically. So what would happen is you would buy a product and they would add PPI on the end. They would add extra charge and extra money on the end of it that you didn't actually need because it was already part of what you were paying for. So they were mis-sold PPI. Hence now why people are getting their money back. This isn't free money. This isn't money for doing nothing. This is money that people have paid in the past for something that they shouldn't actually been paying for, so they're getting their own money back because they were conned. But now the consumer wants to see social responsibility from the businesses it buys from. We expect certain rights, quality, safety, price and good customer service. We expect when we buy things that it's safe. We expect a good price. We expect good customer service. We also expect now things like social distancing, wearing masks, hand sanitizers, and it's very interesting, and certainly do look into it because it's something that you can talk about in an essay. It's certainly very interesting to see which companies are really stepping up to the COVID and which companies are not. So, for example, we are interested in good treatment of employees, to the people that work for you, putting back into the community, environmental concerns such as recycling, not using sweatshops, we'll come to them shortly. Consumers are crucial to changing business and how they are run. For example, Nike and Gap over child labour. Nike now monitor its factories following the Panorama programme. Now, this was probably before your time, I would say. But there used to be programs like Watchdog and Panorama that looked into these, and Nike and Gap got some seriously bad press quite a few years ago now for the sweatshops and the conditions that their workers were in, and an awful lot of shops have come under this judgment because of the conditions that they're enforcing. So things like Nestle, coffee, etc., all looking at the people that are working for bare minimum pittance, for countries like us that then pay a lot of money, and then the businesses are reaping in the rewards. And what happens is people really don't like it. Gap certainly nearly shut down. Nike struggled and had to do a massive U-turn because people don't like to think that the things that they're buying are unethical. So there was a lot of protests, and Gap and Nike really, their businesses really did struggle after those programs. The question, however, is this though: would Nike have ever actually done anything if it wasn't caught? So this again makes you think about, did they do it for intrinsic or extrinsic reasons? Did they do it because they thought, oh, actually, we are being bad, let's do a change because we need to, so intrinsic reasons? Or did they think, oh, actually, we look really bad, we need to change it, so that's extrinsic? So again, you can never know for certain the intrinsic or the extrinsic, but it's interesting to think about whether Nike would have actually ever changed it if they hadn't have been caught. Employers versus employees, and this is now when we look at sweatshops and whistleblowing. Employees versus employers, the balance of interest. So, for example, employers want to plan for the future, they want to make profits and keep the employees motivated. Employee wants the best working conditions and job security. If an employee is unhappy, there's a high turnover, poor timekeeping, absenteeism, all result in less profit. If you do not keep your employees happy, they just ring in sick. If you ring in sick, it either means that your current workers have to work harder to fill the job that they'd be doing, or they have to then get somebody else in and pay them short notice. And if you pay sick pay as well as the other person, that's a lot of money. The internet allows for rapid sharing of information plus attitudes of websites which discuss businesses. So what this is saying is, if you are poorly treated, or if you bought a product that you weren't happy with, if you've had bad customer service, the social media now is immense. You can really slash a company's reputation very, very quickly by posting a few bad things about them. Whistleblowers. Now, whistleblowers are very, very interesting. This is someone who risks their livelihood to tell the truth about companies and make businesses accountable for their actions. Whistleblowers are now protected by the law. They are treated as a witness to crimes or can choose to give information anonymously. This is to encourage whistleblowing as something that serves public interest. So basically, a whistleblower is a person that often works within a company or knows of a company and knows that what they're doing is unethical, and so they whistleblow on that company. But the reason why there's so much protection around a whistleblower is because it's very hard then to become employed if you are a non-whistleblower, because why on earth would a company employ you? Because then they'd be thinking, are they going to find something unethical about my business and whistleblow on me? So you really do risk your livelihood, and in some cases, certainly this case that we're going to have a look at, you may even risk your life. So Karen Silkwood is a real life case, very, very interesting. There's a fantastic film, it's obviously an oldie film now, called Silkwood with Meryl Streep in it, so highly, highly recommend checking that one out if you can. But In this case, she died very mysteriously in a car accident in 1974 amidst a campaign to challenge Kerr-McGee over their safety, which was a nuclear facility. Silkwood was a chemical technician at Kerr-McGee's plutonium fuels production plant in Crescent, Oklahoma. She was a member of the Oil, Chemical and Atomic Workers Union. She was also an activist who was critical of the plant's safety. In the summer of 1974, Silkwood testified to the Atomic Energy Commission that she had found serious violations of health and safety regulations, including evidence of spills, leaks, faulty fuel rods, and enough missing plutonium to make multiple nuclear weapons. So the things that she found were immense. We're talking about the same place like where Homer Simpson works. But nuclear facilities, you're working with nuclear materials, you're talking about seriously dangerous things. During the week prior to her death, Silkwood was reportedly gathering evidence for the union to support her claim that Kerr-McGee was negligent in maintaining plant safety. Now, Silkwood was obviously killed in this car accident. However, her case did continue without her, and they did find Kerr-McGee guilty. It's just unfortunate that Karen Silkwood had to die in the process. And then that's a picture of a tomato that's been mutated with plutonium. Obviously, you can imagine what that would do to a human being, which I can't really put on a PowerPoint, so I've used the picture of the tomato, but it has catastrophic impact on human beings. Extreme malformation. I don't even think that is a word, but you know what I mean. So very, very interesting case. Do check out the video, but this is a really good example to use for a whistleblower. There's been a lot of whistleblower cases. Obviously there was the WikiLeaks case, etc. So do check out other cases of whistleblowing as well. The final section then, the final theme that you can talk about is what is called globalisation. Globalisation is where a company becomes global. They move all over the world. So like McDonald's. I don't think there is really a place in the world that does not have a McDonald's. I mean, that's pretty immense, isn't it, really? That no matter where you go, there will be a McDonald's. This is integrating industries, economies, markets, cultures and policy making around the world. So, can you work out the most common countries that businesses move production of products to? So, can you work out where most things are made? The easiest way of doing it is have a look at where your clothes are made. So have a look at where your clothes are made right now. See what countries they're in. Have a look where your shoes are. Well, you won't be wearing shoes, you're probably wearing slippers and pyjamas. So see where your clothes are made, because that is the sign of where most production is. So let me just have a look at my top. My top is made in... Writing is very small. India. My top is made in India. So have a look. Yours is probably Turkey, Cambodia, Ethiopia, countries like that. No, so look at the clothing label. So why do you think this is? Why do you think your clothes have been made in these countries? And of course you are right if you are saying cheap labour. That's exactly why. Cheap labour in these countries. Lack of health and safety, no minimum wage requirement, no break requirements where they need breaks, etc. So they have none of these requirements in these countries. Globalisation, the process of globalisation is speeding up. Technologies are changing, communication is faster now. You can have Skype communications, you can have Zoom communications, so you can have a board meeting with people all over the world via Skype or via Zoom. Transport is cheaper and faster now. Removal of capital exchange controls, so money is moved easier. Consumer tastes have changed as well. We like eating foreign foods. What have you had last night for tea, for example? What do you eat at the weekend? Most of us have at least one foreign food a week. Chinese, Indian, pizza, Italian. So, you know, we like foreign foods now, which means that there is a demand, there is a need. UK gets year-round food and produce because of globalisation. Businesses are now freer to choose where they operate from. Sorry, just going back to that point as well, it's very interesting if you have a look when your mum or dad or whoever it is does the shopping, have a look at a lot of the labels because it actually says where the food is from, certainly fresh fruit and veg. So, for example, have a look where, you know, your strawberries have come from, have a look where your apples and your oranges have come from, because again, it says the country of origin. This is because of globalisation. Businesses are now freer to choose where they operate from. So businesses are taking trade to countries not influenced by unions or equal equal rights, and therefore the labour is cheaper. Manufacturing has moved to Indonesia or phone lines to India. Interestingly, now companies actually say call centres in the UK as like a selling thing now, that actually they have UK based call centres, because obviously people a few years ago started to get very irritated that whenever they run call centres they always spoke to somebody that obviously it was sometimes quite hard to hear, because talking on the phone is quite hard anyway, and so it's quite hard to hear somebody, especially if they've got a very thick accent. So you know, but they moved to these countries because, again, of cheaper labour. The justifications of this continuing is it gives jobs in small income to poor countries, it trains people in new skills, consumers are happy, the buyers, because you get cheap clothing and cheap services, and consumers can also buy products all year round. You can have bananas all year round. Issues, however, so the crosses mean issues. Global companies taking trade from smaller businesses. So, for example, Caribbean Bananas cannot compete with Del Monte. Del Monte is a massive company, and so the smaller businesses just can't compete and then go under, and it means the money is not being held within that small community. You keep poor communities poor and big companies rich because, again, the money is leaving the country rather than being put back into their country. It takes jobs away from countries with stricter human rights acts, so fairer wages for cheaper alternatives. So, for example, not a lot is produced in this country because it costs so much to pay all of your workers and all the health and safety and all the sick pay, etc. So it means that jobs are taken away from countries like ours. Indigenous cultures are affected, the deforestation and pollution of the countries, and then child labour. So we're just going to have a very quick look at the reality of sweatshops. Now, on the 24th of April 2013, so we're not talking a long time ago, we're talking about your lifetime for this. A Bangladeshi factory collapsed. The factory supplied Primark and other companies like Walmart, which is Asda, with low-cost clothing. Over 1,100 people died in the building called the Rana Plaza. More than 2,500 were injured. The day before the collapse, the shops on the ground floor of the 80-storey complex shut because of the cracks in the building. The garment workers were ordered to return to work. Some were threatened with being docked a month's wages. After investigation, it was found that the upper factory floors had been built without permits and without reinforcements for the heavy machinery. Why? Because they could. So basically, in this huge building, because the sweatshop where these people were working was on a high floor, the floor hadn't been structurally sound for the heavy equipment and machinery that was on there. So cracks started to appear on the lower floors of the building. And so the workers of the lower shops and the lower floors left the building because it was unsafe. But the workers in the sweatshop were forced to keep working, and they were said that they would lose their jobs, that their wages would get docked if they did not come to work. And so when the Rana Plaza actually collapsed, because it was going to collapse because the structure was not safe and these people did not want to go to work, that many people, 1,100 people died and 2,500 were injured. Amnesty International campaigns for global human rights. They want this to be made global, that the human rights, that everybody should have the right to feel safe at work. 30 million was given in compensation. It'd be very interesting to know if any of that compensation actually went to the families that lost people. Health and safety on all buildings now, and 35 further unsafe factories were closed. But again, a bit like the Nike and the Panorama, would anything have happened if this factory hadn't fallen down? A factory was going to fall down at some point because none of it was health and safety checked, none of it had permits, etc. So it was going to happen eventually. And this is the reality of it. Because when you say 1,100 people died, it doesn't really, you can't really understand or think about what it is that happened. But looking at these pictures, for me, is heartbreaking. That this isn't something that's happened in the 70s or 80s. This happened 2013. Do we not know better? Do these companies not know better? And the answer is no. That because they had cheap labour, they could. Because these countries didn't have health and safety, they could. And people died because of it. All right, so does globalisation encourage or discourage the pursuit of good ethics as part of good business? So you need to be able to consider globalisation. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? So companies going global, what are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? I will send you this link out. I want you to have a look at the case of Apple and the making of the Apple Macs and how the Apple factories have dealt with, again, a lot of their own ethical problems. So I'm going to send you the link, or you can just use that one there, but I'll send you the link to the Apple clip. Yet Microsoft, in comparison to Apple, donated over 1 billion since 1983. That statistic probably will be a lot different now because this PowerPoint's a few years old, so it's probably more than that now. And Google is investing 1 billion in providing cheap internet for developing countries. So compare that to the Apple link and see what you think. Final section, then. You're doing ever so well, everybody. Final section. As I said at the beginning, you need to be able to apply this to your normative ethical theories. So your normative ethics is your Kantian utilitarianism. Something that you might want to draw upon, first of all, is a blueprint for better business. This was written in 2012 by Cardinal Vincent Nichols. He said the 7 principles of good business. Now, this does link with natural and the Catholic teachings, so it's not something you have to necessarily link in, but it's of interest. He says that these 7 things. So what I would say is see if you can link any of these 7 to Kant or utilitarianism. Can you see a link between these things and the ones that you have to link in? So human dignity. Each person can never be merely an instrument valued just for its usefulness. Now that should be screaming utilitarianism to you. Not only the word usefulness, utility, utilitarianism, but this idea of merely an instrument valued for its usefulness, that links to the ideas of means to an end. So please go through each of these and try and make links to Kant and utilitarianism, because this here will get you the A grades in an essay. This will show wider understanding by linking it into your Kant and utilitarianism. So please, just like I've done there with human dignity, go through the rest of them. In an essay, you only need to mention 1 or 2. You do not need to mention them all, and the numbers are of no relevance or importance. Or the order is of no relevance and importance. The common good. The set of social conditions which allow people more easily to develop individually and communally as a community. Solidarity. We are all dependent on each other. This means that we must be in touch with communities and strive for the same common good. Subsidiarity, so there you go. Subsidiarity, I can't even say it, is not only good business practice, but it's good for the people concerned, so it shows efficiency. Fraternity, this idea of fellowship towards those of different cultures, so building relationships. Reciprocating or I can't even say that one either. Reciprocity, been a long day, you can tell, can't you? Giving to everyone which is due, what is due, and being willing to do more than just the strict justice requires. So again, that idea there of, do you just pay people minimum wage, or do you give people more money? So that idea of giving people what they deserve based on how well they work, for example. And finally, sustainability, this idea of duties to future generations, so care for resources and the environment. We have to sustain this in order for future generations to have something. So once again, please try and link these in any way you can to Kant, goodwill, duty, universalizability, and utilitarianism. If you've got Bentham, Isidoric calculus, you've got altruism from Mill, higher and lower pleasures. So see if you can make any links across. Any link at all is worth gold in an essay. Kantian and business, whistleblowing, this idea of importance of honesty and promise keeping. Do you remember that idea of lying promise? So he's one of his examples. So this idea that you need to keep the promises that a business makes to you, and if they're not, they've made a lying promise. But what about the promises that you make as an employee to the company? You know, are you breaking your contract with them? Globalisation, using countries with fewer human rights, means that you're using them as a means to an end. You cannot universalise exploiting every nation, every person. There's no goodwill or duty either. So you can't universalise the maxim of cheap labour. Kant promotes the importance of equality, and globalisation often promotes inequality. Kant was also opposed to slavery on the grounds that consent requires free will autonomy. And again, you might want to think about linking that to Rana Plaza, this idea of consent. There was no consent there. They were forced to go back, or they would risk losing a month's wages. And in this case, they lost their lives instead. William Temple, in Christianity and Social Order, develops Kant's second formulation, means to an end. And he says the act always good for the persons, good of the persons. The purpose of production is consumption. So manipulating the market to create shortages to maximise profit is immoral. So basically what that means is you create a shortage so that people want it more to maximise profit. So that could potentially be linked to things like what happened with the COVID food hoarding, this idea of the toilet roll, panic, etc., of everyone buying toilet rolls. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually started by a toilet roll company that were going to run out, so that people then went and bought more, even though who actually ran out of toilet paper? You know, I always thought that was very bizarre that everyone went and bought toilet paper, yet didn't buy things like pastas and spaghetti and beans and things. I'm thinking, for me, they're far more important than toilet paper, but that's my own view. But this is the idea that you can't manipulate the market to make more profits. That is immoral. And to use buyers as a means to a profit is wrong. So from the names covered on the PowerPoint, again, who do you think might argue against that actually you can use us to make profit? Finally, utilitarianism might resist whistleblowing depending on how much harm was done in a particular case. So, for example, if you whistleblow and that company then shut down, all of those people would then be unemployed. So is it worth closing them down? So is what they're doing so bad, or should they actually stay open? You've got to weigh the balance of good versus harm. Globalisation, Western goods, that like our country, Western goods produced at lowest possible price, greatest happiness for the greatest number. So Western goods, things that we buy, like Primark, we like the fact that Primark is cheap, and we can buy cheap clothing because they have to be made cheaply somewhere else. Bentham, however, would reject this view. He did not believe in greatest happiness for greatest number, but that in that way using people unethically. Peter Singer was a modern day utilitarian, he's still alive, argues we should focus on minimising pain rather than maximising pleasure. So he did a bit of a twist on utilitarianism in saying that we shouldn't maximise pleasure because pleasure is too subjective. Everybody's pleasure is different, yet pain is universal, so we should focus on minimising people's pain instead, because people all feel the same pain. So we must consider the individuals and minorities as well. So, final part then. Using the keywords from this topic, can human beings flourish in the context of capitalism and consumerism? So, that's quite a hard question, and you might want to start by putting capitalism into your words and consumerism into your own words, because obviously they sound difficult, but they're not. So you might want to quickly do a little definition of each of them and then answer that. Do you think we can flourish, do well, prosper, advance, etc., live good lives within capitalist or consumerist society, which is what we're living in? So we live in this society. Do you think this is good for our flourishing though? So try and use the different names and different words in this topic if you can do. And again, what would Kant or a utilitarian say? So I know it's quite a long topic and I know it is quite dry, but certainly the essays that you are going to write, because we are going to practice this one together, this is going to be an application we're going to practice, you can really get your teeth stuck into business. You can really take it to that next level because there are so many examples out there. So do make sure you did your research as well that I should to do last lesson, where you look at currently what companies are doing with things like COVID, currently what companies are doing as far as, you know, environmental things. Look at the companies you use, look at their websites, look at their charity events, look at their environmental involvement, etc. And are they doing it because it makes them look good, or are they doing it because it's the right thing to do? So do your research, see what's going on in the news to do with businesses as well, because all of this adds so many layers and context to your essays. So where we are going to go from this, once we've finished business, we are then going to spend a couple of lessons starting to have a look at how to write application essays, because that does get quite tricky. So we've already done 2 essays. Well, we've done two paragraphs, but they're of good size. One that looks at natural law versus situation ethics, one that is going to look at Kant versus utilitarianism, and then what we're going to do is we're going to layer in euthanasia into your natural law situation ethics, and we're going to layer in your business to your Kant and utilitarianism to help you develop this application technique, because it is a tricky one, but we're going to work together on it. So for now, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. If you do have any questions, obviously pop them underneath or send me an email, and I'll reply as quickly as I can. Otherwise, bye for now, folks.